Hi, I'm Roberto with Source One Environmental. Today we're going to go over an 8-inch pipe patch from start to finish. The first thing we want to go over is our kit contents. Every kit is going to have an instruction sheet. On that sheet is going to be a kit contents list. You'll get 2 protective sleeves, a roll of electrical tape, zip ties, rubber gloves, spatula, a work surface to protect the area of work, and then the 2 key components are going to be our fiberglass and our resin. The next list on our instruction sheet is going to be our equipment checklist. We have our packer, which is a 610/24 flow-through packer. We have our flex adapter, our regulator assembly, which is going to allow us to control the amount of air we put in our packer. We have our push rod. You can either push these into place or pull them, and that's what you would use these for. In either case, pushing or pulling, you'd have pull cables on either end of our packer. We have a knife, a pair of snips, a tape measure, and we also have a marker. A couple things that we don't have here is air hoses, compressor, camera, which is very important because that's how we're going to transfer our measurement, and then also something to clean the line with. Now that we've gone through our kit contents and our equipment list, we're going to work off the checklist located on the back of our box. The first step is going to be to clean and prepare the line. We want the line to be free of any debris, so we're going to use a jetter or some form of cleaning equipment to make sure that we get that accomplished. As we're cleaning and inspecting the line, so after we've cleaned and we go to do our inspection, we can also take our time and make our measurement, whether that's at the inlet of a pipe like we're going to do today, or it's at the top of a manhole. For today's install, we're going to be using our air line, a regulator assembly. We have a small section of air line hooked up to our packer. We'll of course have our flex adapter, and then we have our packer itself. Now from this point forward, we wouldn't want to be changing any of our equipment. So if you do need push rods for your install, then you would have those hooked up as well. But in our case, this is the equipment we're going to use. So this is what we want to use from this point through the end of our install. We want to make sure that we have a section of pipe with 2 holes drilled into it. These are going to be so that we can see the white lines on our packer. Now that we have the packer fully inflated, we want it to feel like a fully inflated basketball. We want to make sure that there's no gaps in between the packer and the pipe itself. And then we also want to make sure that we document that pressure on the back of our box. And for today's install, it is going to be 19 PSI. Please make sure that you check your packer, because those pressures are going to be different based on age, temperature outside, so please make sure that you do a test. Now that we've tested all of our equipment, we want to transfer our measurement. When we do that, we want to make sure our camera head is directly in the center of our 2 pack out lines. We're going to extend the cable as straight as possible for the camera, and then we want to make sure that we transfer our measurement to either our push rods or pull cable. We don't want to ever use the air line for transferring measurements because it can become inconsistent. Now we're going to prepare our packer for our dry run. We want to make sure that we put our packer directly in the center of our protective sleeve. One of our folds is going to go down and the other is going to go up. We're going to use our tape to attach our protective sleeve to our packer. You want to make sure you stretch the tape out really well. This is what it's going to allow us to retrieve the protective sleeve after our install. If your sleeve is longer than your packer, you can either fold it back up and over and tape the excess so we leave the flow through open, or we could actually trim this off. And then we're going to spin the packer. Again, making sure that our packer is in the center of our protective sleeve and that the side that went up is the same on this side and the side that went down is the same on the opposite end. Again, make sure that we stretch the tape out really well. And then try to leave a tab so it makes removal a little bit easier on yourself. The final step in this process is going to be taking your snips and cutting small little incisions in the folds that we made. We're going to do the same on the opposite end as well. This is going to allow the air to release while also still keeping the protective sleeve intact so we don't get any resin on our packer. It's going to allow us to wrap it really, really tight, the fiberglass itself. Now we're going to perform our dry run. So now that we've prepared our packer, we are going to make sure that we can get our packer to our spot of repair. So you would have your cables hooked up, your push rods or your air line. Make sure that everything is how it's going to be for your live run, just to make sure that we can get it there with no obstructions. Once we've done that, we'll remove it from the pipe. And then we will use the second protective sleeve that's in your kit. We will remove this and swap it out for a new one. When we bring our packer out after we've done our dry run, we want to inspect and make sure that there's no large gouges or anything on here that should show concern when we go to do our install. Now we've laid out all of our PipePatch materials. We have our work surface laid out on our table to protect it. We have our spatula for mixing. We have our resin. We have our fiberglass, and then we have our zip ties. Our zip ties are going to need to be bridged together. When we bridge our zip ties, we want to make sure that the ends are facing in the same direction. And then we're just going to pull one to the end, and then we're going to put the two together. And that's what we're looking for. All right, before we move on to our next step of mixing the resin and wetting out our fiberglass, there's a few things I want to make sure that we have done. So we redid our plastic after our dry run, so our protective sleeve is now changed out, it's a new one. We have our work surface laid out to protect our table or the ground we're working on. We have our fiberglass laid out, our resin is ready to go, our spatula is here for that, and then we have our bridge zip ties. Some things we want to make sure that we do is that when we're working, we want to make sure that the fiberglass stays dry until we have saturated with the resin. We also want to make sure that we have some form of cover over us, whether we're working in a garage or if we're under a canopy of some kind. We want to make sure that our packer stays out of the sun as well as ourselves and the resin while we're working. Before we wet out, we want to make sure that we locate the shaggy or the chopped side of our fiberglass and the shiny side. We want to make sure that the chopped side is facing up. This is going to take about 2/3 of our resin. We're going to wet out this side first. We will then flip the material over, wet out the opposite side, and then we'll proceed through the process. All right, now we're ready to wet out. So before we do that, we have our air compressor is on, our pull cable is ready to go, our air lines or push rods, everything is set before we start to mix. Because once we start this process, there is no stopping it. So you're gonna pull the bottom pouch, and that's gonna allow the material to start mixing. So give it a good shake. We're gonna lay it down. We're gonna use our spatula to get all the material out of the corners. Flip the bag. We're gonna do the same thing on the opposite end. And then we're gonna work the resin to one end. Grab your knife or your pair of scissors. And then we're gonna grab right around 2/3 or close to it of our resin. Set this off to the side. And then we're gonna push the resin into the material. You wanna have no white spots or spotty sections when we do this. We wanna be as uniform as we possibly can. Things to avoid when we're doing this: we don't want to scrape. We want to kind of lay our spatula flat. We don't want to have any big pools on it. And then again, make sure there's no, so I'm just gently dragging the spatula now to kind of get our excess or pooling, and we just pull it off to the side. Work your hand along the edge, lift up. And obviously for our longer patches, doesn't hurt to have an extra set of hands for the flip. Want to use all the resin that's provided to us. And again, we're just pushing that material into the fibers. And again, if you have any pulling, you're just gently scraping it off to the side. And then we're going to take our fiberglass, fold, trying to keep everything as square as we possibly can. And then we're going to have a 1-inch overlap. So that's the process of folding there. Lose your first set of gloves. Just kind of fold the plastic up along the edges, just to kind of keep our packer as protected as possible. And take our packer. Make sure there are patches within those two lines. Now the rolling up of your fiberglass onto your packer, there's no perfect way to do it. You can do it many different ways, but the things we want to avoid is we don't want to trap our plastic in any way, and then we also want to make sure that it is as tight as we possibly can get it. So I'm kind of just tucking the material, and I like to end up with the seam on top as best I can. Now I'm gonna have Travis come in, give me a hand. He's gonna lift that far end of that packer up for me. Thank you. And Travis on the air side. So this end is going to get the least amount of abuse when we go to put this in place. So we want to have one on the end, put one in the center of our patch. And you want to make sure these are as tight as possible. Have Travis jump to the other side for me. And on this end, this is the pull end or the push end or whatever you want to call it. And this is going to take the brunt of the abuse when we go to put this in place. So we're actually going to put one, I would say about an inch from the edge. And then we're going to put another tie here, just about an inch behind that, inch and a half or so. Perfect. Thank you, Travis. And we're going to take our snips. We're going to leave little tails, but we don't want them excessively long. So about a ½ inch or so. We're going to cut all these down. So that is what a packer and a patch should look before it gets installed in the pipe. For us today, we're using airline. We would hook up our pull cables on both ends, and then we're ready to install. So when we go to install, we want to avoid the inlet of the pipe or even the top of the manhole. We want to get that edge up off there as best we can. And then we go to our predetermined mark. And now we're going to inflate to our predetermined air pressure that we had on our box. Once we've reached our pressure, we're going to monitor this along with our air compressor, and we're going to wait the allotted amount of time that's on the cure chart on your kit. All right, now that we have our patch in and curing, some things to note. On our box, we have a spot to write down our mix time, which was 11:30. We have a spot to write down our inflate time, so the time it took us to install and then inflate our patch. And then we also have a spot to write down our deflate time. So for this kit today and the conditions that we're working in, we want to wait a minimum of 90 minutes before we decide to pull this patch. Let's talk about the 3 different silicate resins we offer here at Source One Environmental. What you're seeing right now is our cure chart. We have 3 different types of silicate resin. One is going to be our rapid. We have a summer mix. And then we have our most popular, which is our winter. When you go to choose your resin, you want to focus on ambient temperature for your working time. And then we base everything off of curing in ground at 55 degrees. While we're waiting for our patch to cure, let's talk about a few things. One being our resin. So our resin has no VOCs, no harmful chemicals. As long as our material is mixed and cured, it can be thrown away in your standard trash. The other nice thing is that we have our work surface, so everything can be folded up. Nice and neatly. And we can use our box as our trash. Once it's cured, we can throw the entirety of the box away. Now that we waited our allotted amount of time, we're going to pull our packer out of the pipe. How we're going to do that is taking off our air supply line and then just releasing the quick connect. The way we want to remove our packer is either giving a push forward on our push rod or giving a pull on the pull cable. And usually just a gentle push forward breaks the plastic free, and then we're able to retrieve by the pull cable. We'll also want to remove our plastic and wipe any debris or flush the flow through out if need be. All right, this concludes our video on 8-inch pipe patch from start to finish. If you have any more questions, please reach out to your local salesman or rep, or visit us online at s1eonline.com.